for teaching purposes. The handbook is free, the LinkedIn is free, the ISWAG resources are free, and I encourage you to look at these and consider having these in your department. This is a picture of the Vietnamese version of the handbook. When imaging in cardiacs, if you are in this room and you are at the very beginning stages, you may find these rules helpful in imaging. First, before I say the rules, it's important to understand that when we examine the heart in a screening context, not diagnostic, in a screening context, we look at 5 sections. Stomach, 4-chamber, 5-chamber, right ventricular outflow tract, and the 3-vessel view. I want to first of all to show you the golden rules, and then I want to show you abnormalities in each section. And then from there we will go to live scanning. So I will start my clock. It's important that you understand for each section of the heart, you don't need to take this down, it's in the handbook, but what are the abnormalities that you can see when you examine the 4-chamber, or the 3-vessel tracheal, or the left ventricle? What are you expecting to see? And these are all the abnormalities broken down section by section. But before we go to those abnormalities, which I will do section by section, I want to share a very basic rule with you. That every time you do a cardiac scan, I don't start by looking at the 4-chamber. I start by asking myself where is the descending aorta? Because once I know where the descending aorta is, it allows me to determine the left atrium, the left ventricle, the right ventricle, and the right atrium. There are very, very, very rare exceptions to that rule. So it doesn't matter what position the baby's in. It can be a terrible patient with large BMI, terrible images, transverse position, extremely active, and you're trying to work out what's what. If you just remember that the chamber closest to the descending aorta is always the left atrium. That's your defining landmark. Left atrium, left ventricle, right ventricle, right atrium. Very simple. Golden rule number 1. Golden rule number 2. Before I tell you the rule, I'm going to ask you a question. This shows the 3-vessel tracheal view. And I want you to tell me, is this a left heart lesion or a right heart lesion? Does anybody want to tell me? I'm not showing you the 4-chamber view of heart. I'm only showing you the 3-vessel tracheal view. And I can tell you, by looking at that 3-vessel tracheal view, without looking at the heart, whether it's a left heart problem or a right heart problem. How come? How can I be so sure? When I look at this case, I ask you the question, is this a left heart problem or is this a right heart problem? I can tell you without looking at the 4-chamber. Do you know why? Because the vessel that's closest to the trachea is almost always the transverse aortic arch. So if this is the trachea and this is the transverse aortic arch and this is blue and this is red, this is telling me that there's a reversal of flow in the pulmonary artery or the arterial duct, and I'm looking at a right heart lesion. In this case, that's the trachea, and this is a reversal of flow in the transverse aortic arch. I know that that's an obstructed left heart lesion, or likely to be an obstructed left heart lesion. So the golden rule number 2 is a very simple rule, is that the vessel that's closest to the trachea is always the transverse aortic arch. There is one exception to that rule, and I showed it as the last case the first semester. I don't want to confuse you, but when you've got a right aortic arch or right arterial duct. It's the duct that's closest to the trachea. But forget that, it's rare. For 99.9% of the scans that you do, the vessel that's closest to the trachea is the transverse aortic arch. And therefore, if I see red flow here, I know there's a reversal of flow in the transverse aortic arch, and it's likely to be a hypoplastic left heart syndrome. Possibly coarctation of the aorta. Possibly mitral atresia with VSD. So those three things were on my mind before I even looked at the four-chamber view of the heart. That's why in the first semester, the four-chamber and the three-vessel tracheal are so powerful when you apply these rules. If I see reversal of flow here, I know that's reversal of flow along the arterial duct. I'm thinking of pulmonary atresia with intact ventricular septum, hypoplastic right heart syndrome, tricuspid atresia with VSD, without even looking at the four-chamber view of heart. With these golden rules of red and blue, it's very important that for every examination that you do, is that you aim to have the fetus in the perfect position with the apex up. It's making that basic assumption that that's how you're evaluating these structures. And if that's the case, because we all like to examine the heart, and in live scanning we will examine the heart with the apex up, so that inflow is red and outflow is blue. And therefore automatically, if I see a blue jet here, forgive me, it's a red pen, but imagine it's blue. If you see a blue jet, you know straight away that that's tricuspid valve regurgitation. So there's tricuspid valve regurgitation, that's reverse along the arterial duct. So I've shared with you the three most essential rules in cardiac imaging. Chamber close to the descending aorta, left atrium. Three-vessel tracheal view, vessel close to the trachea, the transverse aortic arch. And when you're doing an examination of the heart, always have inflow, so that red is up, blue is down, inflow is red, and outflow is blue. In the perfect world. The remainder of the golden rules as we go through them is to use the city loop, because the heart beats so fast, and we had a talk today about rhythm disturbances. You will understand rhythm disturbances when you slow the heart down and recognize, is it really a rhythm disturbance or not? But also from the point of view examining the structure in this baby. I don't know if you recognize there's a problem on this four-chamber, but I think there is discordance in the ventricular sizes. And also, I don't like the appearance of the intra-atrial septum. I think the foramen ovale is restrictive. When I put on color Doppler examination, I didn't actually recognize there was a problem until I slowed the city loop down. It's only with the city loops that was slow that I realized that there was forward and reversed flow in the pulmonary vein, telling me that it was a hypoplastic left heart with a restrictive foramen ovale. And then there are many scenarios and examples I can give when looking at color Doppler, looking for valvular abnormalities, that I can work out what the problem is as long as I turn down the city loop speed for pulmonary regurgitation, trivial tricuspid valve regurgitation, mitral valve regurgitation, aortic stenosis with post-valvular dilatation and turbulent flow. And I showed you this case of total anomalous pulmonary venous return. I didn't appreciate it until I turned the city loop down to 50% of the native rate. It was very clear to me then that there was equal volume of forward and reverse flow. This is a baby, the four-chamber view of heart was abnormal, and I didn't know what the problem was. Does anybody know? If you look at that four-chamber view of heart, what strikes you? If you look at the movement of the interventricular septum, you have paradoxical movement of the interventricular septum. you have an abnormal wave of movement because this baby has got a left atrial aneurysm. That's a very subtle abnormality in that baby. And you can see how easily that will be missed. And the only way it was appreciated that this baby had a left ventricular aneurysm was by cine-loop, that I could see paradoxical movement of that interventricular septum. Then I knew the diagnosis was correct. Otherwise, I wasn't certain whether it was just discordant ventricles that you see commonly in the third trimester of pregnancy. That's the power of cine-loop. Golden rule number 5. When you're imaging the heart, it's a very good idea to image with both 2D and color side by side. The advantage of that is when color is on, it's sometimes very hard to see where the regurgitant jet starts. Is it at the level of the AV valves, or is it deep inside the ventricle? But I can look on 2D at the same time and look at color and appreciate that the valves are thickened and dysplastic. I use my cine-loop rule number 4, I slow it down, and I can demonstrate both 2D and color at the same time. And you saw when I was doing the live scanning that I did that during live scanning. Split imaging, comparing color with 2D. It allows me to make sure that my settings are correct, because I represent the fill and I can compare the 2D image to the color and then decide whether my settings are inappropriate or whether they are correct. Golden rule number 6. I'm going to ask you a question. And I'm going to show you a 3-vessel view of a baby's heart, and I'm going to ask you a question. Do you think the 3-vessel view is normal? And for most meetings that I attend and I ask an audience, do they think that 3-vessel view is normal? They focus on the SVC, they focus on the aorta, they focus on the pulmonary artery. They say, yes, it's normal because the pulmonary artery is larger than the aorta, which is larger than the SVC. Main pulmonary artery, larger than the aorta, larger than the SVC. So it's okay. And I say, no, it's not okay. It's not okay because I can't see the pulmonary valve. And that's why most cases of pulmonary stenosis are missed in the third trimester of pregnancy, because you are not looking at the pulmonary valve. To bring the pulmonary valve into view, you have to see the free wall of the right ventricle, and you have to scan up to the 3-vessel view. That is not made clear in the ISUOC guidelines. It is made clear in the cardiac handbook. I've divided in the handbook the 3 components of the right ventricular outflow tract, because it's important to understand the different sections that you can see. You can see this section, which shows the main pulmonary artery, the arterial duct, the aorta, the SVC, the trachea. In this one, you see the main pulmonary artery. The right pulmonary artery should always be smaller than the aorta. If it's bigger, you need to think of coarctation and possibly anomalous pulmonary venous return. But the right pulmonary artery should always be smaller than the aorta. And then the last view is showing the left and right branch pulmonary artery. The left branch pulmonary artery is much harder to see when compared to the right in routine imaging. Don't ask me why, I don't know. But it's important to understand these 3, because the branch pulmonary arteries most go out to the same level, whereas the duct goes superiorly to join the aorta. So golden rule number 8 is to understand when you sweep from a 4-chamber up to a 3-vessel, is to understand the curvature of the pulmonary artery as it comes out of the right ventricle and its relationship to the right ventricle. This is a normal case showing the pulmonary artery with normal curvature. It's convex to the left. Because in babies with transposition of the great arteries, the pulmonary artery comes out of the right ventricle and is convex to the right. If every single day you do a scan and you look at what happens when you sweep from a 4-chamber up to the 3-vessel view, you will appreciate the curvature of the pulmonary artery coming out of the right ventricle. This shows what it looks like with TGA. This shows what it looks like normal. So if I run a clip with a split image, you can appreciate the main pulmonary artery and the direction that it comes out. You can also appreciate the free wall of the right ventricle, and now you can see the pulmonary valve. And you've also demonstrated a split image, and you've also demonstrated red is up and blue is down. And you've also demonstrated your colour settings are correct, because the amount of fill of that vessel equals the size of the vessel that you're seeing on 2D. So you know everything's right. You're applying 4 rules in that image, of a split image of a right ventricular outflow tract. Golden rule number 9. I think golden rule number 9 should be golden rule number 3. And I'll probably change it in the handbook. Because I see the biggest mistake that people make when they're imaging the baby's heart is they take up the probe, they press cardiac button, and they expect that the scan is going to be fine and show them everything. That's not the case. Because the velocity of flow in a baby's heart changes for each week of gestation. Therefore, you cannot use the same PRF at 30 weeks to the PRF that you use at 24 weeks. And you can't use the same PRF 24 that you use at 36. So let me ask you a question. When you go in to do a scan tomorrow morning, and you're scanning a baby at 13 weeks, what do you set your PRF at? Many people don't pay any attention to the PRF. They take up the probe and they scan. If there's no colour, they increase the colour gain. Or if there's too much colour, they turn down the power, they turn down the colour gain. That's a fundamental mistake. And you will miss diagnosis if you do that. The first thing you have to set is you have to set the PRF. You have to understand that the velocity increases for each week. And a baby at 13 weeks of gestation, I will set the PRF at 25 to 35 centimeters a second. A baby at the mid-trimester, at a 21-week scan, I'll set it at 45 to 65 centimeters a second. And a 3rd trimester scan, I'll start at 75, going up to 90 centimeters a second. That's the most important thing to set. The second thing is, you need to make sure your output is the next button you touch. And make sure that your acoustic output, both your mechanical and thermal index, is less than 1. And then the third control, and the last control, is the colour gain. So this is a baby who I'm scanning in the 1st trimester of pregnancy, and my PRF is at 28 centimeters a second. I will reduce my acoustic output, my power output, in many babies in the 1st trimester. In this case, in a baby in the 2nd trimester of pregnancy, I will set my PRF at 65 centimeters a second, and I will get adequate fill. And when I have the setting correct, I will appreciate that there's trivial tricuspid valve regurgitation. I would not appreciate tricuspid valve regurgitation if I'd set that at 80 centimeters a second, 90 centimeters a second, 100 centimeters a second. I would not see it. And if I set my PRF at 25 centimeters, every baby will have tricuspid valve regurgitation. So the priority is to set the PRF for the weeks of gestation that you're going to perform the scan. And also set your PRF for the structures you're looking at. For example, if I'm looking at the pulmonary veins at 27 weeks of gestation, I'm going to reduce my PRF down to 20 centimeters a second, not at 85. To look at the ventricles, I'll set it at 85. But the pulmonary venous blood flow, I'm going to start at 25 centimeters a second. And if I really want to demonstrate the pulmonary veins, there is one other control, is my balance. I reduce my balance. So I write gray over colour. And that will bring me definition of the ventricular septum, definition of the AV valves, definition of the pulmonary veins. Golden rule number 11. We do most of our cardiac imaging around before 25 weeks of gestation. And in normal babies, the peak systolic velocity in any vessel, in any chamber, in any atria, in any ventricle, renal arteries, cerebral arteries, arterial duct, transverse aorta, is always less than 100 centimeters a second. It's a very easy rule. The rule of 100. So for every mid-trimester scan, if you are ever suspicious that there is a valvular abnormality, and you put a pulse Doppler gauge in the region of turbulence and it's more than 100, it's likely that you've got a problem. It's just a very helpful, easy rule without having to refer to the velocity of flow for each week of gestation. So I go to work tomorrow morning, golden rule number 12, and my sonographer knocks on the door and says, Simon, I've got a baby and the aorta is slightly dilated. And I've done a pulse Doppler gauge of the aorta. It looks slightly dilated here. And I do a pulse Doppler placing it over the valve. And I'm getting velocities of 120 centimeters a second. I'll say that's very little, 120. I wonder whether it's just a false positive Doppler reading. The only way I can convince myself whether that is truly aortic stenosis, and if it is, it's very mild aortic stenosis. The only way I can be sure is if I take the pulse Doppler gauge and I go and drop it across the pulmonary valve, and I get a velocity of 45 centimeters a second in the same baby in the pulmonary valve. And I also look at the laminar flow. It's hypoechoic in the center and echogenic around the periphery. That is typical laminar flow. I now believe this baby has got aortic stenosis, but it's only when I compare it to the pulmonary artery, because the velocity of flow in the pulmonary artery is the same as the velocity of flow in the aorta. And if I want to have a control to compare, I drop my pulse Doppler gauge. So it's important to develop the technical skill of being able to drop a pulse Doppler gauge from the aorta to the pulmonary artery, from the aorta to the pulmonary artery, as a quick way of picking up pulmonary stenosis and aortic stenosis. If you want to know two conditions that are missed, the most common condition that is missed on prenatal imaging in the outflow tracts is pulmonary stenosis. And there are two reasons it is missed. Because number one, we do not bring the free wall of the right ventricle and the pulmonary valve into view. And number two, our color Doppler settings aren't correct. And if they were correct, you should then place a pulse Doppler gauge over the pulmonary valve and compare it to the aorta. And then you will start picking up every case of pulmonary stenosis. And same for aortic stenosis. Golden rule number 13. When I do a scan, and you saw it yesterday when I scanned, I never scan with one probe. I always ask, where's the second probe? Because I will only know which frequency is best after I've tried another transducer. How do I know that that's going to be the best transducer? The only way I know is by moving up and moving down. So for every examination, I gauge how the body mass index of the patient, BMI, I gauge what the transmission of ultrasound is, and if I feel I can get a higher frequency, I will move to it. And you remember me asking yesterday for the 5 to 9 curvilinear after I start with the RLB7. And then the next I want to do is a vaginal scan, where I'll scan with the 10 megahertz probe, and if I get very good images with the 10 megahertz probe, then I'll move to a 12 megahertz, the 6 to 12 transvaginal. So always pushing for a higher frequency will give better results in examining any baby in pregnancy. You basically look at the highest transducer. You only know by trying that. So this is a baby at 21 weeks of gestation. This shows a curvilinear 6 megahertz, showing a bilateral SVC. moving to 9 linear transducer, and you can see how clear the extra SVC is. And as you look now, moving to 15 megahertz, and now you can see streaming down the aorta entering the coronary sinus. But that shows the power of frequency in routine imaging. Golden rule number 14. In demonstrating every scan in our unit in the first, second, and third trimester, every sonographer takes this image. And they show that the stomach is on the left-hand side and the heart is on the same size as the stomach. And that 2/3 of the heart is in the left hemithorax and 1/3 is in the right. We do that for medico-legal purposes. Because when I go back for every scan that's done in the unit, I want every sonographer to take this image, which forces them to establish what the situs is, the position is, the axis is. You can't just on those images work out, you need to know where the head and spine is. But that single exercise makes somebody go through that exercise. It forces a protocol of practice that everybody does the same things. And we do not miss a situs inversus or a left atrial or right atrial isomerism. I'll skip golden rule number 15 in the, oh no, maybe we'll do it. Golden rule number 15 is, it's very hard to see the outlet ventricular septal defect. And you say to me, Simon, how do I get outlet VSDs? You cannot get outlet VSDs on a 4-chamber. So how do you get an outlet VSD? How do I get that image that shows me the outlet VSD? Because I need to bring into view the tricuspid valve and the pulmonary valve in the same plane. The best way to do that is to go to a 4-chamber view of heart. Sweep up to the right ventricular outflow tract. Now you see your pulmonary valve. Rotate the transducer until you see the right pulmonary artery sweeping behind the aorta. And once you are in that view, you now have the tricuspid valve and the pulmonary valve. And now, in this region here, look for evidence of a membranous or an outlet VSD. That's a practical tip of how to get the outlet ventricular septum by sweeping from a 4-chamber to a 5-chamber and then rotating so you get that transverse section and you see the Mercedes-Benz of the aortic valve. And when you are looking at the Mercedes-Benz, you must see the tricuspid valve and the pulmonary valve. And it's here that you look for infundibular pulmonary stenosis in babies with tetralogy or Fallot. So this is a baby who's got an outlet VSD. When you look at this, you can see the defect. Here's your Mercedes-Benz, but you can see this is the pulmonary valve, tricuspid valve, and now you get an appreciation of a split image with the settings that red is on top, blue is on the bottom, and then you can see the defect here in the outlet septum. And that view is obtained by sweeping from my 4-chamber up to a right ventricular outflow tract. Golden rule number 16. This shows a 4-chamber view of heart that shows regurgitation, and you can see it's regurgitation because you know red is up, is fill, and blue is away. And both of these two cases show exactly the same thing, both tricuspid regurgitation and mitral valve regurgitation. For most babies that I see with tricuspid valve regurgitation, the vast majority I see, it's a benign finding, incidental finding, no associated structural abnormality, no volume overload, no cardiomyopathy, no Epstein's, no tricuspid valve dysplasia, no pulmonary atresia with intact ventricular septum. It's a benign finding. But if I see mitral valve regurgitation, it's almost always pathological. It's very different to tricuspid valve regurgitation. On published data, 5% of all pregnancies have got tricuspid valve regurgitation. Mitral means there's a problem. And you need to look for critical aortic stenosis, cardiomegalies, cardiomyopathy. And in this case here, you see mitral valve regurgitation that's tiny, jet mitral valve regurgitation in a baby with critical aortic stenosis. Be very quick with the last rules. Golden rule number 17. When looking for an aberrant subclavian, you will not get colour fill by looking for colour or power with the baby in this position. The baby needs to be in that position, or preferably in that position. You set your PRF at 15 centimetres a second, and even lower in the first trimester. That's for colour, for power. But if you use slow flow in that position, slow flow will pick flow completely independent of angle of incination. And that's why slow flow is a beautiful technology, because you don't have to worry about the Doppler angle. The vessel will fill. That's why our sonographers pick up aberrant subclavians in the first trimester. It is so much easier in 2026 than it was in 2016, 10 years ago. This shows you 20 weeks of gestation, my PRF is set around 22 centimetres a second at 22 weeks. It's not at 45 because I'm looking at a much smaller vessel, so I drop my PRF. I then demonstrate this vessel going behind the trachea, giving off the internal thoracic artery. And another one here, aberrant subclavian tracking behind the trachea. In the first trimester of pregnancy, you use the combination of radiant flow, so you're demonstrating a 4-chamber view of heart, and then up to the 3-vessel tracheal view, and that's why we do a split image. So you can appreciate which is left and which is right, and that constant reference of the 4-chamber and the 3-vessel tracheal view allows you to identify aberrant vessels. And you don't have to use power. The beauty about slow flow is it will shine up with minimal effort. You have no control of PRF with slow flow. No control at all. The only control you have with slow flow is power output and gain. And the first button you change is not the gain, it's the power output. You need to reduce your power output. And frequently in the first trimester with using slow flow, I will have my power down to 80%. I seldom go below 70% of my power in slow flow setting. When you were looking at a VSD, pediatric cardiologists like to look at ventricular septum in this view. Obstetric sonologists like to look at it in this view. I like to look at the apex at 1 o'clock or the apex at 11 o'clock. There's controversy about that as to what's the best angle. I'm just sharing with you my opinion. I pick up most muscular VSDs. This is the view that I want, not the apex at 12 o'clock, not the apex at 3 o'clock. I want it at 1 o'clock, or I want it because I know the flow that comes out the ventricular septum doesn't come out perpendicular just because the hole's there. It's like a mesh, a fishing net, and the direction of the flow that comes out, I find it best in that position. So this is in a transverse position. It's nice for looking at Doppler evaluation, and also similarly, you can use the graphics flow in demonstrating it. When you see it in that transverse position as well, it's likely that the VSD is bigger if it's picked up in that position. When you're looking at the AV valves, I need to finish up. When you're looking at the AV valves in a baby who's got a partial or complete AVSD, it is impossible to get a short axis view of the AV valves to work out whether it's a partial or complete VSD with the apex up. The only way is by making the heart such that the apex is at 3 o'clock or at 9 o'clock. And once you bring the apex at 3 o'clock or 9 o'clock, all you have to do is flip the transducer 90 degrees, and you will then demonstrate the short axis. So if you look at the short axis with the apex at 3 o'clock, I simply rotate the transducer and it shows me my tricuspid valve and my fish mouth mitral valve. But I can only do that with the apex at 3 o'clock. It allows me to get a short axis view, and now I see a common AV valve. And in the common AV valve, I want to know, is there a bridge of tissue going across? Is it partial or is it complete? Because I cannot tell that on a standard view of a 4-chamber view of heart in this position, whether it's a partial or a complete AVSD. It's only on a short axis, and the rule is when seeing a short axis, I start with the apex at 3 o'clock. transducer. And this shows another example. You sweep up, you see the interventricular septum, and then you come up to the AV valve. As you come up to the AV valve, you see a complete AV canal defect with no bridge of tissue across the defect. I think we'll stop there, maybe go to live scanning quick. One other point to mention is with regard to muscular VSDs, everybody thinks that you see muscular VSDs on a 4-chamber view of heart. But you actually see muscular VSDs on the outflow tracts as well. Let me show you what I mean. This is a 4-chamber view of heart. This is the aorta, ascending aorta, and then the pulmonary artery, or higher, the pulmonary artery. And as soon as I get to the pulmonary artery, the VSD comes into view. I have left the 4-chamber. I have left, finished the left ventricular outflow tract. It's very important that when you sweep to the right ventricular outflow tract, that you look at the muscular septum, because you will miss VSDs. If you think muscular VSDs are only seen in a 4-chamber, no, that's not true. And the reason why we're not seeing them is because you go to the short axis and you can see how anterior this muscular VSD is, or short axis. Most muscular VSDs are at a mid-septal level that we see in a 4-chamber. This is seen in an RVOT view. Go to rule number 20. When looking to suspect that there's an AVSD, when looking to suspect that there's a valvular abnormality, the best section is that the apex be perfectly at 12 o'clock. This allows me to assess whether there's dropout in the perimembranous, dropout in the atrium primum, and it allows me to assess whether I'm looking at a partial AVSD. And if I want to get the answer whether it is a true AVSD or not, then I bring the apex to 3 o'clock and rotate 90 degrees. But in the screening context, to pick it up, I want the apex at 12 o'clock. You will miss AVSDs if you screen by looking at the apex at 3 o'clock. You need the apex at 12 o'clock to identify it. The experienced person in the room will appreciate that that's an AVSD, but the inexperienced person will not appreciate that. And if you bring this heart around to 12 o'clock, everybody in the room will appreciate that there's a complete AV canal defect. So different positions for different structures at different times. Thanks very much for your attention.